Welcome to the Dream Life is Real Life podcast with your host, Hannah Hermanson, bringing you real-life stories of people who realized their dreams to educate and inspire you to create your legacy of abundance now.
Everyone, I am so excited to introduce you to Laura Gassner-Otting. Laura is an author, which we're going to talk about her brand new book. And she also speaks with change agents, entrepreneurs, investors, leaders, and donors to get them past the doubt and indecisions that can hold back their greatest ideas. So she delivers strategic thinking, well-honed wisdom, and a catalytic perspective that's informed by decades of navigating change across the startup, nonprofit, political, and philanthropic landscapes. Laura, welcome.
Hey, it is great to be here.
I know. Okay, so we just got a little bit of your background, and it's pretty varied. So can you give us just like the 2-minute snapshot of how you got, from working in all those industries to now having this new book out?
Yeah, well, I would love to be able to tell you that it was like this very particular, very strategic, very well executed plan. But it wasn't. It was, I'm 48 years old. I've had 25 years of a career, and I look back on it and I can now say that, okay, all these dots connect and there is a common thread that makes sense that goes through them. But the truth is that along the way, I just said yes to things that seemed interesting and exciting because I firmly believe that there's an adventure around every corner if you just look hard enough. And while we might not know the lessons that we're going to get from each adventure, they do kind of all come together at some point.
Mm-hmm. Have you always had that attitude that life is just an adventure and full of opportunity, and you were always willing to say yes? Or was there some time in your life when it didn't feel as limitless per se?
Well, I mean, I am somebody who dropped out of law school to join a presidential campaign because I was inspired by the message of the candidate. And I ended up volunteering on that campaign and ending up in the White House when I was just shy of my 22nd birthday. So, I got really lucky, I think, early on because I said yes to things that inspired me at times in my life when I didn't have a big safety net, but also didn't have that far to fall, right? Like I graduated from college very luckily without a lot of student debt. I didn't have a family to support. I didn't have a mortgage. I was 21 years old. I didn't care if I slept on high school gymnasiums or if I, was eating ramen soup or things like that. And sorry about that. And I was able to take these big chances in my life because if I failed, it would just not have been that big of a deal. It would have been fine and I would have been able to figure out the next thing. I think now that I'm older and I've got, sort of more complication and more complexity in my life, it might be a little bit harder to do that. But now I understand that there are smaller steps that I can take to develop competence and to show competence in the things that I want to do so that I can have the confidence to do the bigger things.
Absolutely. And something I gleaned from your book, which we're going to get into, is that it isn't this all or nothing, right? In order to make steps towards your best life, you don't need to be, couch surfing and eating ramen, but you can be taking incremental strategic actions that get you closer or farther away from that couch maybe.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple different ways to do it, right? You can break all the plates at once. You can leave your family, you can leave the job, you can leave your house, you can do everything and just go for it. And some people do that, and that's successful for them because, frankly, failure is not an option. You have to make it work. Mm-hmm. And success might look differently than what you thought when you jumped out of the airplane, but you still find some path forward. But there's all kinds of other ways to do this. And this is, I have a 16-year-old son who likes to play video games. And I had a day where I woke up not feeling that great. I'd had a terrible night of sleep. I had a chapter due to my publisher. I had a speech that I needed to work on that I was giving in front of 5,000 people a couple days later. And I knew that I was not having a great day and I wasn't going to get much done. And I was bemoaning to him my sad state of affairs. And he was like, well, why don't you just go on a side quest? Now, I don't play video games. So I was like, well, what's a
I
side
don't know
quest?
either.
Right? Okay. So now imagine this. you're playing a multiplayer game. Everybody is signing in from somewhere else. And the main quest is to go to the castle, slay the dragon, and save the princess. You finish doing dishes after dinner earlier than your friends have. And while you're sitting in front of your keyboard waiting for them to log on, you can either sit around and do nothing and be bored, or as a farmer, you can tend your crops and you can till your wheat and you can sell the wheat for money that you can bring to the market. And at the market, you can buy a horse and a sword and some potions and things like that, so that when your family or friends finally finish family dinner with their family and finally finish doing the dishes and finally log on, you're ready to jump on your horse, go to the castle, slay the dragon, and save the princess. So there's all kinds of side quests we can be doing right now if you're thinking, God, I would love to do that, but I have to get through this next quarter so I can get my bonus. Or I would love to do that, but I haven't finished, getting my yoga certification yet. Or I'd love to do that, but I've got small kids at home and I've got to get out of debt first, or whatever the things are that are holding you back. Those things are all real, but they don't need to be holding you back from making some sort of progress. So you could listen to great podcasts like this. You can read my book. You can read Hannah's book. There's so many things that we could be doing. You could be listening to TED Talks. You could be taking a class. Doesn't have to be the whole new degree, right? You could just take a class. You could listen to any one of the thousands of free classes that universities are offering online. There's so many ways that we can get smarter and get better and collect arrows in our quiver, so that when we are ready to jump on the horse and go to the castle and slay the dragon, we can save the princess.
Yeah, absolutely. I think that's really great advice. And I was the girl who smashed all the plates at once, moved 2,000 miles away, quit my job, started over. And a lot of people come to me like, oh, that's so brave. That's so courageous. And I get that that's not the way for everyone to go. For me, it felt way more like brave to just keep doing what I was doing and live that far from my purpose. But anyway, what I find to be true in people like me who either go all in or they take years to study and hone their craft and learn, at some point when you are ready to get on your horse, if we're going to continue with that, you start to get a lot of pushback. And it can come from yourself, right? Those limiting beliefs. And it can also come from loved ones and people around you. And so your book, Limitless, How to Ignore Everybody, Carve Your Own Path, and Live Your Best Life. What are some of the top tips you have for people who start to run up to their own limiting beliefs and also the blatant doubt of others?
Well, I think first we have to understand that the vast majority of people who are giving us feedback about our hopes and dreams are really giving us feedback about their fears and anxieties. Right? So most people who you tell about your plans will go, oh, but what if this happens? And what if that happens? And what if these things don't happen? And oh my God, when I sold my executive search firm to the team that helped me build it, I had a really interesting experience where I didn't actually have a plan of what I was going to do next. I had a little bit of financial flexibility and I wanted to just learn about a bunch of stuff and figure it out. And so I would run into friends on the street and they'd say, well, what are you doing now? And I'd say, I don't know. And this look of fear and terror would come over their face. I don't know what box to put her in. I don't know how to check a box now. I'm not sure what the shortcut is. I don't know how to file her away in my mind. And they'd be so nervous about my uncertainty, which I was perfectly fine with because I understood that I sold my firm for a certain amount of income. That income was going to carry me forward to a date certain. On that date certain, by then I needed to figure out a plan where I had new income coming in. I was fine. They were freaked out. And so I had this fascinating experience where I realized that most of the people who had been giving me advice throughout my entire career were really giving me their own interpretation and their own lens, and not necessarily, they would tell me what would work best for them and not necessarily what would work best for me. So as soon as I understood that really relieved me of the burden of taking everybody's advice at the same level of value. And it really helped me to think, well, who is it that I do care about? Who is it that does know me? Who's in my family, like my group of friends and family that understands and sees me as who I am now? We have parents who give us advice, but those parents really haven't lived with us on a daily basis since we were 17, 18 years old. They don't know who we are and what we're capable of today because they haven't seen it. Not because they don't love us, but they just don't see us every day. And we have other friends now who do see us all the time and don't necessarily see that we're the 18-year-old who couldn't remember to pick up our socks from the floor, but that we are these capable human beings, and they see our promise and our potential. And so I think it's important to keep your family around, but I also think it's important to increase them and augment them and create a family who really are the right people to listen to. So I think that's the first thing. I think the second thing is that comparison is really truly the thief of joy. I think it is at the bottom of so much misery when we're listening to the Joneses, all of those friends on social media with their perfect little Facebook profile photos and their perfect little Instagram sunset video, photos on vacation. And we see only their highlight reels. And all we think to ourselves is, well, I'm not that happy. They seem so happy. I must be doing things wrong. And we see the fancy car, or we see the fancy vacation, or we see the fancy clothes or the fancy person. We think, well, I want those things, but we don't see the slog of 80 hours a week that they're working. We don't see the fights with their spouse when they're not able to show up for, some event because they're busy working. We don't see the kids that are pissed off because they weren't present. We don't see the bad stuff. And so we're only judging our bloopers by everyone else's highlight reel. And so, of course, we feel like failures in that. And then I think the last thing to do is to stop measuring success by everyone else's definition. It may be that the fancy car is your definition of success, and by all means, then you're not going to mind working the 80-hour-a-week job to get there. It may be that you don't actually care about the fancy car, and what you really want to do is go travel and spend lots of time going to remote destinations, in which case you're not going to want to work the job that gives you the fancy car and the fancy paycheck, but you're going to want the job that maybe is a little less glamorous but gives you more flexibility and more vacation time. The only person who gets to decide what success means is you. And once you decide what it means to you, then you can create a life that is leaning into that instead of leaning into everyone else's externally defined definition.
Yeah, absolutely. And I definitely wanted to talk to you a little bit about kind of screwing the Joneses, which you talk about in the book, and not worrying about what success means to everyone else. And another conversation, I didn't think about this until you were just talking how it relates, is for entrepreneurs who are committed and going to, fulfill their purpose and start a business with that. I see this difference between lifestyle entrepreneurs, like you said, the ones that just want to have enough, and then the achievement entrepreneurs who need to earn $1 million and have the car and keep going, just push and see how fast they can go. So what is your take on that? And even how would you classify yourself? Do you think that you're fulfillment or achievement entrepreneur or a lifestyle entrepreneur yourself?
So that's a really interesting question. And I've done 60 podcasts in the run up to this book, and nobody's asked me a question like that. That is fantastic. I would say that I am probably right now an achievement entrepreneur more than a lifestyle entrepreneur. But at different ages and at different life stages, I've been one or the other. And sometimes one at the expense of the other. Right now, I'm an achievement entrepreneur, not because I'm trying to maximize my income, but because I've been in the last 3 years new to the public speaking circuit. I've had very fast and unexpected success in that space, speaking to thousands of people in big events. I was at an event a couple weeks ago in Canada where there were 5 speakers, and Malala was one of them. Right? I mean, it was big deal stuff. And I'm suddenly, because the book is getting a lot of attention on national TV, I've been, on the Today Show, I've been on, live national TV, and I wasn't expecting any of it, but because I love puzzles and I love trying to figure it out, I'm fascinated by the idea of how do I master the craft of public speaking, of keynote speaking in this sort of asymptotic curve where you're never going to get it perfect, but I can get as good as I can possibly be at it. How do I do that as fast as possible? Number one. And number two, how do I understand the game of the business of public speaking? Why do some people get $10,000 to go on stage? Why do some people get $50,000 to go on stage? Why are some people struggling and not making any money? And I'm interested in the business part of it. So I think I'm achievement oriented in that if I want to do anything, I want to do it at the top of my game.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Yeah. I asked that question and it came from an own exploration I think it's totally true that there are eras or phases of like, okay, I want to build this. And then now I want to enjoy what I built.
And for me, it's a little different also. When I founded my firm 18 years ago, I ran it for 15 years before I sold it to the women who helped me build it. When I founded it because I had this moment of rage in like the big marquee firm, and I knew that I could do the work better and differently and with more purpose and more authenticity and actually more profit than they were doing. And once I realized I wasn't part of the solution of how the work should be done, I knew I was part of the problem, and I couldn't live with that inside of me. That just it presented this dichotomy that I couldn't. I couldn't marry them. And so I founded my own firm, but my oldest son was 6 weeks old. And so I founded the firm, yes, to make enough money, right? There's the need to make money, and then there's the want to make money. And I founded it so that I definitely made the need to make money. And everything above and beyond that to the want to make money was a question of, I want to maximize the impact I'm having in the world, because this was all work done for nonprofit organizations. And I want to impact the flexibility. I want to maximize both the impact and then also the flexibility I have for my very young and growing family. Mm-hmm. And I don't need to maximize profitability right now. I just need to make sure that I'm above the need to make number and somewhere trying to approach and figuring out how I can get closer to the want to make number. So there were times when I was definitely, looking for more flexibility and more lifestyle in my entrepreneurship. But even within that, I wanted to do that as best as I possibly could.
Yeah. I got you. I feel your vibe. So, Laura, the listeners would be disappointed if I did not circle back to what you talked about as far as your speaking and how that has sort of snowballed, because I know a lot of listeners would love to be charging $5,000, $10,000, $50,000 to give keynotes. So it sounds like you may have had a unique path, but what are some of those starter steps, some of those getting yourself out there tips that you'd have for listeners?
Oh, well, so I would say if people are looking to get out and speak, the best way to do that is to get out and speak. I know that seems really, obvious, but here's what I did. When I sold my firm, I did have a little bit of this crisis of identity. Like, well, if I'm no longer Laura Gassner-Otting, CEO, who am I? And all of these people on the street are looking at me with these faces of panic. I don't know who I am. So I created lauragassnerotting.com and I started blogging, and a friend called me and said, you ought to think about giving a TEDx. And she happened to be the executive producer of TEDx Cambridge. So I applied for that, completely terrified, got up there, did it. And TEDx Cambridge is one of the higher tier TEDx events that provides you with incredible video. That video got some attention, and that attention got me offers to speak, and they started coming in at like $1,500 and $2,500 and $5,000. And that was the point where I said, if I'm going to do this, I better actually get some, I better get some training. I better actually, if I'm going to do this as a professional, I better be a professional. So I went to Heroic Public Speaking, which is run by Michael and Amy Port and Mike Ganino. And I went to a weekend conference and I learned some of the tricks of the trade of how to do it. And then I started going and speaking. And each time I spoke, I actually invested some of my own money. It doesn't cost a lot of money, a few $100s to find a local camera crew to come and do a 1 camera or 2 camera or 3 camera shoot. And then there was one event I did in Las Vegas where I had to give a talk in the morning to like the younger women, and then a talk in the evening to the older track of women. It was a women's leadership conference. And I literally went back to my room in between and changed outfits. So I would look like it was 2 different speaking events.
Absolutely. Yes.
And so the next thing you know, 6 months have gone by and I've got film from 10 different events, and I have some B-roll that they took from audience. And so suddenly I have this speaker reel that makes me look like I've been speaking for decades, and it's professionally done. So I look super legit. Now, obviously, I have 20 years of background. I know what I'm talking about. I've got depth and substance in the work that I'm doing. I got a woman who I profile in my book actually sent me a video that she tattooed the art from the cover of the book on her arm.
I saw that on your Instagram. I thought it was you.
No, it is not me. It's a woman named Tara Diab who was in the book. She was so passionate about the message of the book that she wanted to remember how to live this way every single day, and she wanted a reminder. So she tattooed it on her arm. I feel very strongly that we have to get it right. So I did all these things to package myself to look like I was legit, but I also spent time making sure that my message was right, because people, like, we spend a lot of time when we first start speaking and thinking, I really want to start speaking. I just have to get out there and talk, and I need to make sure I know how to do it right, and I know how to land my lines and do the comedy bits and take the pauses in the right place and go stage right and go stage left. But we have to spend just as much time also making sure that the things we're saying on stage are right, because people are going to change their lives based on the inspiration we give them.
Yeah. Okay. So what I'm taking away from that, and kind of to summarize, is be in action, go do the thing you want to do and document it, and know that you need to be strategic and have a message that's going to be true, aligned to your heart and what you want people to leave with. But also that it's an evolving process. And the more you get out there and do it, the better you'll get at that.
Yes. And the other thing I'll say is to stop waiting for people to give you permission to be the expert. When my first book was about moving from corporate to nonprofit work, a book called Mission Driven, going from profit to purpose. And I wrote that book because I got a phone call one day from an editor at Kaplan Publishing saying, "We want you to write this book. Are you interested?" And I was like, okay, sure. So they sent me a contract. I signed it. They sent me an advance. I gave them 80,000 words 6 months later. And suddenly here I am. I'm an expert. And why am I an expert? Because at some point 6 months earlier, I wrote a 3-paragraph blog post that I put on my own website telling people how to make this transition from corporate to nonprofit work. So I decided I was the expert. I told the world I was an expert. Somebody gives me a book deal to write a book that now tells the world I'm an expert because I told them I was an expert. Right? So again, I happen to have a depth of knowledge and I was an expert, but I didn't wait for someone to give me permission to be the expert. I just started telling the world what I knew. All of us know something better than anybody else. We may not be like the world's greatest expert on everything, but we know something very, very well. And we should get out and talk about it because the world needs our messages.
Absolutely. Yeah. I always tell my clients, if you don't own it, no one else can. Meaning, if you don't own that you're an expert, no one can pay you to be that expert and learn from you.
All right. Nobody wants to pay you a lot of money to get on stage and be somewhat certain.
Totally. Okay. This is great, Laura. I'm loving it, but we are reaching a bit of a pop quiz. So are you ready for just 3 last rapid fire questions?
Sure.
All right. Question number 1, and you sort of talked about this, but I want to really hear your pointed answer. What is one action, one thing listeners can do today to get them closer to their dream life?
They can decide what their dream life actually is. Not someone else's, not everybody else's ideas, not everyone else's checkboxes and everyone else's paths, but their actual dream life.
Huge. I love that. And you guys, digital detox, go into nature or a quiet room and sit with yourself. I recently redid this and I was like, I might not be an achievement entrepreneur. Anyway.
And you might have been at one point, but you're not now. And that's okay because at every age and at every life stage, it will change for us.
Yes. Yes. A+. Question number 2 is, and you can do shameless plug here, but if you could hand out one gift to every listener, whether that's a resource or an event or something that changed your life, what gift would you give listeners today?
Well, I guess I have to give a shameless plug for my book. So I would give them my book. Well, here's what I would do. I would tell them to go to a quiz that I created online at limitlessassessment.com. and I'll say that again for people driving, limitlessassessment.com. And it's based on the book, and it will walk you through the 4 elements of consonance. How do you live a life where what you do matches who you are? And at the end of the quiz, which takes about 15 or so minutes, it will tell you where you're not in consonance and give you some, quick tips about things that you can do right now today to start getting yourself there.
Amazing. So the last question is related to that. Where can people stay in touch with you, get your book? Where do you want folks to go? Is it just to the quiz there?
Well, they can go to the quiz, but on all the socials, I'm at Hey LGO, Laura Gassner Otting being my initials, Hey Hey LGO, and heylgo.com is how you can find me online. And of course, my book is on Amazon, Barnes & Noble, and anywhere fine books are sold.
Amazing. Yeah, I've had this book for a while, but I realized it's an advanced reader copy. So it's out and in living paper everywhere now. That's right? It is
out and in living paper everywhere. In fact, it debuted at number 2 on the Washington Post bestseller list right underneath Michelle Obama, which is amazing and exciting and just really mind-blowing.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for blowing our minds, sharing your expertise, your time, and your energy with us today, Laura. We appreciate you.
Thank you. It's been great fun.
Good. So, folks and friends, we will be back next week with another inspiring guest that, of course, will help you make your dream life your real life, whatever that looks like.
You've been learning how to make your dream life your real life with Hannah Hermanson. To get the resources mentioned on today's show and to listen to past episodes, visit www.dreamlifeisreallife.com.